Hi parents, hi heroes. Today, I wanted to walk through with you guys a recent paper on the impact of parental alienating behaviors on mental health of adult alienated in childhood. Now, recently we had some discussion about, I believe, the impact of parental alienation, I think. And then we recently posted a summary, like some highlight of this particular paper, and then there have been a lot of questions and comments about it. So I thought it would be helpful to go in and actually walk through the paper and highlight the actual outcome of it so that you have a better idea of what it is about. I want to clarify that um, I think I even saw comments saying that this is not peer review. Now, this was published on Children. Children is a peer-reviewed scientific paper. So it's absolutely a scientific paper. It was peer review. I also wanted to let you know that this is not the first, this is not the only study on the impact of parental alienation on adult children. There are other studies, and we will find time to talk through with you about some of them. Let me know if you can hear me okay, and let me know where you're calling in from. If you have any questions, please do let me know. So let's go into it. I'm gonna share screen with you guys, so you can actually see what I'm talking about. Okay, so can you actually hear me? Can somebody let me know in the chat room? I don't see comments yet. I'm gonna assume that it's my set, somehow the setting has always been kind of a problem at the beginning. But can you guys hear me? And where are you calling in from? So this is a paper. The title of it is the impact of parental alienating behaviors on the mental health of adults alienated in childhood. Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Melissa. Thank you, Christine. Okay, you guys can hear me. Thank you so much. Okay, so this paper was published by Susan Verhaar, Mandy Matthewson, and Caitlin Bentley. Now, this was published in February, actually in March this year. So this is a very recent paper. Jay is in California. Jay, wonderful. I am also in California. I'm not sure how far you are from me, but we do have some events in California that potentially I hope you could join us. Okay, so like I said, this was published in Children. Children is a very prestigious scientific magazine. It's actually very well respected. So there's nothing questionable about this publication. Okay, so this is a qualitative investigation on the mental health of the adults exposed to parental alienating behaviors in childhood. So I'm going to kind of just go into the actual content. So they talk about the first thing they discuss is the alienating parents. Taylor is in Thousand Oaks. So you're not far from me at all. Kaylin is from Australia. Thank you. Mike is from San Antonio. Mike, we have a lot of stuff going on in San Antonio. So I'm glad you are calling in. I hope that you join us in those kind of activities. Fernando is from San Jose. Okay, San Jose is a little bit north, but that's great to have you. Like I said, we do have activities in California that we would love to have parents involved, actually in other places too. But okay, so the first thing, let's just look at this. Let's talk about alienating parents. I'm not sure if it's too small for you guys to see. Let's just try to make this a little bit bigger so that you can actually read it with me. Okay, so the first thing you're talking about, to understand the experience of the alienated children, it's good to understand the characteristic and behaviors of the alienating parents. So they talk about these are, the alienating parents tend to have paranoid, histrionic, or narcissistic personality traits. Doesn't mean that they are diagnosed, but they have those traits and maybe have affective disorders, suicidal ideation, lack of resilience around separation and loss. They tend to have dysfunctional family histories, poor relationships with their parents. So you can see that there's a history in their upbringing that is impacting them and causing them to sort of have these desire for vengeance coupled with the feeling of anger and frustration, and they may inhibit them from having more moderate view of the relationship between the child and the targeted parent. Okay, so as a result, alienating parents engage in behaviors and processes that prioritize their own needs over and above the child's needs. So Taylor is in California, but her children are being alienated in Texas. Now, interstate is always more complicated and more challenging. I feel for you because that makes it even harder for you to fight. And I'm sorry. Fernando said it's vindictive behavior. It's very true. So, and then a study examined, and this is not this current study that we're looking at. This is talking about a previous study by other people looking at the adult children in America, found that alienated parents use similar tactics to cult leaders to alienate the child from target parents. And I think we talk about this a lot, is that parental alienation is very much similar to a cult process or cult culture, right? We see this sort of demand for devotion and commitment from the child to the cult leader, which is the alienating parent or the alienators. So that demand of the unreasonable commitment and the expectation that the cult followers, in this case, it's the alienated children, to give up their personal all needs and well-being and the relationship with other people, right? So we see that, and we talked about that before, and we also had interview of experts in the field of cult process and things like that, and they talk about it. It's really very similar. Okay, the similarities include, so this is the similarity between parental alienation and the cult process, requiring excessive devotion. Right, we just talked about that. The use of emotional manipulation and persuasion techniques to reinforce dependency, right? So the children is fearful because they feel like if they give up that relationship or standing up to the alienating parents, they are scared because they don't know if they're going to be end up on the street, if they're going to be punished in some way, right? So that and there sometimes is also manipulation in a way of saying like, oh, I'm heartbroken if you're going to the other parent. So then the child feel responsible for the alienating parents. So there's that emotional manipulation and persuasion techniques. The denigration of the target parents. Or the outside influence of the cult followers, right? So it's like only us in the cult cultures are good and everybody else is bad. So it's kind of like that. The alienating parent, only our side is good and the other parent, everything with the other side of the other parent, the extended family, is all bad, right? So there's that. We have Fernando's mentioned about the 5-factor model. Yes, 5-factor model is a forensic psychology method to identify and diagnose parental alienation. And I do have a book on Amazon about how to apply 5-factor models and how to build your court case around using the 5-factor model to prove parental alienation in court. So if you guys look for that on Amazon, you'll find it. Claudia from Bexar County, thank you, from Bear County, sorry. Thank you so much, Claudia, really amazing. Always so grateful to have you along. Claudia says, please join Respectfully PAC to help support legislative changes. Yeah, so Respectfully PAC is a political action committee that we created. Claudia is the chair of that. And the focus for the political action committee is obviously to focus on doing legislation and, championing system changes. So definitely recommend you guys to go and participate because we can definitely do with more help. Taylor said Texas is the worst, and Fernando said Ashish Joshi is the best. Definitely, we interview Ashish multiple times. He really understands parental alienation. He gave us really great information on those interviews. Okay, so let's continue with this. Now, so they talk about the targeted parent. Okay, targeted parent can present with a history of passivity. Now, this is pretty common because it's actually because of the lack of setting boundaries, because due to whatever, so many reasons. But that's why the alienators was able to really create this campaign. And I'm not saying that's easy, but there's that kind of history in targeted parents, that passivity, and then emotional constriction, over accommodation of demands made by the alienating parents. We actually see this a lot, over accommodation of demands. Why? Because we love our children and we care for our children, and we wanted to do the right thing, and we thought that, okay, if we're being nice and we're accommodating, then maybe just maybe they will be reasonable to us, right? So targeted parents tend to have to display this type of behaviors. Unfortunately, it a lot of the time it doesn't help. Okay, so targeted parents may also avoid seeking to maintain a relationship with their child for fear of being rejected or hurt, right? And we do see this because sometimes you keep reaching out, and every time you reach out, you get hurt, you get rejected, you get put down, and sometimes even violent, right? You get subjected to violence, and it's coming from the children, it's coming from the alienating parents, it's coming from that community around them, and so it's very hurtful, it's painful emotionally, but also at the same time you don't know how, if you keep reaching out, does it make it worse, right? So that's why sometimes you may avoid seeking to maintain that relationship. And then some people actually thought that targeted parents contribute to their own alienation, but really very often, and this study here argues that the targeted parents may withdraw from their children after realizing they cannot meet the alienating parents' demands, and after recognizing that all venues of resolution are exhausted. And actually, we see this more the case, which is we see a lot of the time that parents are exhausted. They try everything. They reach out to children, they ring, they phone, they text, they turn up to the house, they call, they whatever, they turn up to the school, they reach out in so many ways. They try to fight in courts, etc. And they beg the children, they beg the alienators, and eventually it's going to become hopeless, and so that's the point where they withdraw from trying. So it's not because they are the one that contribute to the alienation, it's actually they have done everything that they could. Okay, Jay said new custody orders should come with or allowed to be asked for in court is body cameras for the exchange only as a way to deter and tame parents, usable in court. So from what I understand, I am not a lawyer, but if custody exchange is to happen in a public space, even including outside the door of a home, is out in the public space, from what I understand, you are allowed to film, because when you're outside, there's no expectation of privacy. So you're allowed to use those, from what I understand. So, but like I said, I'm not a lawyer, so just double check with your lawyer. Okay. Okay, so Fernando mentioned about the four characteristics of alienated parents: angry, agitated, afraid, and anxious. Yeah, that's very good. Actually, that was created or proposed by Dr. Steve Miller, the late Dr. Steve Miller, who really he's an incredible giant. He's a legend in this field, and we are so sad that we lost him recently. But yeah, so he created this 4C for the alienating parent and 4A for the targeted parents. And the 4A targeted parents tend to come across as angry, agitated, afraid, anxious. Actually, I don't remember the exact. So Fernando, I think that may be correct. And then for alienating parent, they come across as confident and something. I don't remember the exact. But what his point is, based on his expertise, he's trying to point out how people can easily misunderstand when they look at the dynamic of a family, and they can think that the target parent is the one that are not fit parent, and then the alienating parent, when they are actually abusive, they actually come across as if they are confident, calm, and cool, and collected, and things like that. Okay. Martin is sharing an article, a news article about some child custody case. I haven't read that article. I've seen that posting around, but so I'm not quite sure what particular case is about. And then Jay said schools should all be trained to support us parents also in this space. Yeah, I totally agree with you. The lack of training is really appalling. I wanted to take the opportunity to remind you guys that on our website, VictimToHero.com, if you go into the information tab and there's a drop down for downloadable, you will see a flyer that we created together with the Parental Alienation Study Groups, the PASG, and that flyer is specifically created for educators. So, you can print that out and you can pass it out to teachers and the school teacher and the staff member at your child's school or other school, any school that you see. It was created specifically using scientific data and information and also legal information to present to them your rights and what are their responsibility when it comes to dealing with targeted parents and alienated children. So if you wanted to use that flyer and pass it around to schools, please feel free to go onto our website and print it, and you're free to pass it around. Okay, so let's continue with this. And then they're talking about alienated children, and they said that they don't find evidence yet, doesn't mean that it doesn't exist, that there's any specific characteristic or protective factors in the children that will increase or protect them from the likelihood of being, alienated. But they do suggest that anxious, fearful, or overly passive children may lack the resilience to withstand alienating process. So that we don't know what type of characteristic in children would cause them to be affected by parental alienation. But we know a lot of things. There's a lot of study about the consequences to the children that being subjected to parental alienation behavior. It's very clear. There's multiple studies, like I mentioned. This study is not the first one, it's not the only one. Okay, so there's a lot of things that mentioned here. So, there are both negative immediate as well as long-term effects. So we're looking at short-term and long-term effect, and we're talking about things like self-esteem issues, anxiety, depression, substance use, increased suicidality, suicidality, is that how you say it? School-related difficulties, and a great risk of being alienated from their children in the future. And we see this a lot. It's a multi-generational thing. If you are alienated as a child, there's a high likelihood that you are going to be an alienated parent as an adult, unfortunately. And then children exposed to parental alienation may develop a confused sense of self-perception, fail to remember how to trust their perception and feelings, and then so it resulting in an uncertain identity, lack of self-esteem, and deep insecurity. So there's a lot of issues about mental health. These difficulties lead to the inadequate and age-inadequate development of independence and individuality. Okay, so a lot of identity issues. Also increase your vulnerability to mental health disorders such as depression, anxiety, eating and feeding disorders, and PTSD, and other psychosomatic disorders. Okay. These difficulties can persist even when alienated children reunite with alienated parents. So keep that in mind. Even if you reconnect with your children, these problems don't just disappear. The children have been impacted, and these impacts are still going to stay with them, unfortunately. So it is very important to understand more about this problem. So this study then go in and talk about some other study, and like I mentioned, this is not the only study on the impact of parental alienation on the children. So this section here, they summarize some of other studies. So there's multiple studies there. So like you see this one, there's this one, etc. So let's go into this particular study. So essentially, they have a bunch of adults who were alienated as children, and they interview them, and you notice they're coming from all different countries. Okay, so what they did is they do interview on Zoom or Skype, and then they go into the analysis. So let's go into the result. Okay, so all right. So the participant described their perception of how the exposure to parental alienating behaviors in their childhood affected their mental health in adulthood. Okay, so there's a lot of references to mental health impacts across the entire data set, and four broad themes were identified. So there's mental health difficulties, addiction and substance use, emotional pain, and coping and resilience. Okay, so let's go into each of these. Actually, let me just check. Fernando said anything recorded in public should be allowed in court. I believe that's the situation, but also sometimes it depends on how your lawyer presented, and also depends on the opposing lawyer, how they argue it, and then also depends on the judges. So really, there's a lot of factors there. Crystal agreed that the school should be trained to support parental alienation, support alienated parents and alienated children. Okay, Fernando said rest in peace for Dr. Miller. Yeah. So Claudia said, couldn't this be done by asking for a courtesy standby by law enforcement? She's talking about filming custody exchange. I think that is possible, but a lot of the time we don't just turn up with a law enforcement, right? A lot of the time we go and pick up the children, and then sometimes, the other parent may behave, like display a certain behaviors, right? You might still have your children, you might get your children, but there's certain behaviors that perhaps we wanted to be able to show that later on if we do have to fight in court. I think, if I understand correctly, is it fair to say, Fernando, or I think whoever that brought up the point about filming, is that, yeah, sometimes there might be behaviors, and you might go to exchange and have your children, but so maybe sometimes you don't really involve law enforcement. So I think we're talking about filming the exchange and other situation. Alicia, Fernando said counterintuitive. Yes. So he's talking about how parental alienation is counterintuitive, and that's why a lot of professionals and a lot of people in the field of mental health and legal field as well do not understand parental alienation, because it's counterintuitive, and that's why we are in such a big problem as we are today, where parents are not getting help and children are not getting help because people do not understand this. Not to mention the proliferation, the widespread misinformation, unfortunately. So Alicia said this is a great article, printing it out now, great. Fernando said true is both long and short-term effect. Jay said cops are too busy. It depends. Sometimes they do turn up to custody exchange. Quite a lot of the time they do, but it doesn't mean that you always involve them, unfortunately. Okay, so Jay said, thank goodness my daughter had access to weekly therapy sessions after the incident. Thank you. We need more therapists that want to work with the court system also. There are a lot of therapists that would work with the court system. The problem is traditional therapy doesn't work, rarely work. Actually, a lot of the time it actually makes things worse. So really we really need mental health professional to truly understand parental alienation to be able to really help families. Okay, you see the legislation of the body camera may be a good deterrent against any ill will during custody exchange. Is my 2 cents. Thanks in regards to preventing alienation and adding a level of accountability that would be easier to use in court. Okay. And Jay said they are trained, like teachers are trained annually with new development. They are, but unfortunately so I mean this is something that we've been working on a lot. Is we talk to a lot of school district and teachers and legislators, trying to understand like where can we make the change, and what changes can be done. We do understand, we totally agree that training is really needed at all levels, right? We're talking about school teachers, mental health professional, the public, the parents are going through divorce, custody battles, legislators, everybody that need training. So when we're talking about school teachers, like these are people that do get annual training, and unfortunately they are so overloaded, like they are underpaid, they are overworked, and the demand of their training is already so much. When we try to propose putting in another portion in there, there was so much pushback. So we are trying to figure out other way of getting into the system without, we don't have enough resources to dedicate to that effort, but we definitely kind of try to look at different options to work on that. And that's definitely a good suggestion in terms of like training. We definitely see that as an important preventive measure for parental alienation. Jay said law enforcement knows it happens all the time. I think they do, but I think they also underestimate how serious the issue is. I think a lot of the time, law enforcement thinks that, well, this is not a murder case, it's not a homicide, it's not a robbery. At the end of the day, the child is still with one of the parents, so things are all good, right? And also they tend to think, well, this is a dispute between two parents, it's just drama. I don't want to get involved, that kind of things, right? So there's a lack of understanding and lack of knowledge and expertise in this field, and unfortunately that leads to a much bigger problem than it should be. If we could have everybody participate and really taking this seriously and put in the effort, things could have helped a lot better, right? So let's continue with this. So the first category is mental health difficulties. So they're talking about, and this is the bit that we posted on our website, I believe, on our Facebook. So depression and anxiety, they're talking about 55% of the participants spoke about experiencing depression and anxiety in their adulthood, and the impact they said it had on their ability to function in their daily lives, right? And they definitely think that it has something, like they wonder if it's something to do with their childhood, and very likely, right? And then the second thing is they're talking about eating disorder and body image issues. So 20% of the participants report experiencing eating disorder and or body image concern that developed in the adolescence. There was a variability in accounts, and some participants able to explain how the origins of their difficulties arose compared to others who were less certain, So, and then the next thing is about personality difficulties, right? So 40% of the participants describe difficulties related to personality dysfunction, ranging from a formally diagnosed case of borderline personality disorder to a variety of difficulties, including emotion dysregulation, fear of abandonment, splitting, excessive reassurance and validation seeking, mistrust in self, impulsivity, inability to resist urges, and the need to impress others, right? So the problem with these issues is that when the person feel the need to impress other, and like constantly have excessive reassurance and validation seeking and mistrust in self, right, is that they are not being able to be in their full potential, and so they shape their action and behavior based around other people acceptance, and so you never live your life in your own terms. You constantly, and the thing with other people is that they don't care enough about you, and their opinions changes, and it's right. So then you end up living your life for other people, and when those things changes, and then when people change their mind or when people leave, it impacts these children or these adult children, and it creates a lot of pain and hurt and suffering, right? So there's a lot of this problem. Okay, some of the participants also reported experiencing long-standing controlling and perfectionist tendency, which they related to exposure to parental alienating behaviors, mainly aimed at pleasing the alienating parents. So yeah, so trying to please the alienator, these children grew up become perfectionists, and it's difficult to be a perfectionist because then it prevents you from actually strike out to explore for new opportunities, to do things, and sometimes it really frees you up, and there's a lot of other issue as well, right? Okay, the next thing that listed here is PTSD. One participant reported suffering from diagnosed PTSD after living an unstable lifestyle. This participant described moving from one place to another and being exposed to unsafe people after her alienating parent reportedly forced her to move out of the family home at 17 years of age. This participant said that the effect of this experience still caused her difficulty in adulthood. We actually seen quite a lot of this, and actually there have been, because we have interviewed adult children of parental alienation live on this channel, and if you haven't seen it, check out in the VictimToHero Facebook page on our videos tab. You will see multiple videos that we have interviewed adult children of parental alienation, and many of them express experiencing complex PTSD, right? They dealing with a lot of instabilities in their life. Okay, the next thing is psychosomatic symptoms. So 10% of the sample reported experience psychosomatic symptoms such as fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, hypersensitivity to sound and the environment, cognitive fog, alopecia, I'm not quite sure what that is, which some suspected were due to their exposure to parental alienating behaviors. So definitely there's a lot of different issues. The childhood experience manifests into physical condition here. And then ADHD. One participant spoke about ADHD symptoms and possible related diagnosis. They wonder if they had these diagnosed based on the difficulties they had. They also wonder if these symptoms were related to their exposure to parental alienating behaviors in the childhood. And then self-harm. 15% of the participants described experiencing self-harm through cutting, with incidents starting from the age of 11 and continuing to early childhood, adulthood. So we actually have interviewed adult children of parental alienation who attempted suicide and was rescued by people. So really, oh, actually that's the next item, is suicidal ideation actually. So that self-harm is a sort of like a lower level, sort of less serious, and the next one is more severe, which is suicidal. Yeah, we interview adult children that thought about suicide. Many of them did, and we have interviewed someone that attempted and was rescued by other people. So unsuccessful attempt of suicide. Let's check in the chat room. I see John said my daughter is now 23. It's been 10 years. 10 years is a long time. I'm so sorry. She has dropped out of college after being a straight A student. All the effect of alienation that you have mentioned applies to her. It's so sad. I wish I could help her, but I'm still the bad guy. Yeah, you're being seen as a bad guy, and I'm sorry about that. Carol said school and law enforcement sees these behaviors all the time. They can see the Disneyland parents that show up after separation. John said she continues to be hospitalized for anorexia and bulimia, and she now has seizures from malnutrition and has lost 3 teeth to bulimia. Wow, I'm so sorry. Yeah, I'm really sorry about that. And I understand. I think it's hard for you to rebuild when the perspective of your child is that you're the bad guy. And I'm really sorry to hear that. Okay, so the next item, like I said, is about suicidal ideation. 30% of the participants reported experiencing suicidal ideation from adolescent to adulthood, into adulthood, and some were able to link their suicidal ideation directly to their exposure to parental alienating behaviors. Some describe their plan in detail, so they even thought about it, like really, because the more details they think, the more closer to attempt it is really. A further 50% of the total sample reported becoming targeted parents in adulthood. One of these participants, four reported experiencing suicidal ideation and described how the thoughts of their children stopped them from dying by suicide. Yeah, this is really sad, really sad. Okay, the next item is addiction and substance use. Okay, total 41 references was made across 55% of the data set concerning addiction and substance use, impacting participants in adulthood with 3 sub-themes identified below. Okay, so alcohol, drugs, and sex and pornography. So alcohol, 55% of the participants reported that their alcohol consumption started in early adolescence and peak in their late teens and early 20s. So obviously this is an escape mechanism, right? When you're talking about addiction and substance use is when they are suffering so much, these are a way of feeling like they have an alternate reality, right? So one participant described how the smell of alcohol reminded her of her alienating parents and thus acting as a deterrent from alcohol for her. Okay, drugs. 35% of the participants described using cannabis daily, occasionally, or reported a previous cannabis addiction. 20% of the participants reported recreational use of MDMA. I'm sorry, I have no idea what that is. Is this meth? Are we talking about? From what I understand, meth is very addictive and dangerous. I'm not sure, is that meth? So 5% of the participants reported dangerous use of, this is meth here. So I don't know what MDMA is, sorry. So 5% of the participants reported dangerous use of meth and hallucinogens. I assume that is like psychedelic mushrooms and things like that, I guess. Sorry, not my field expertise, so I don't really know this, but essentially drugs use or drug dependency. So some of the participants reported relying on these drugs when going out and consuming high doses of their drugs of choice. Some of these participants recall using substance to numb painful emotion or to feel normal. See, like I was just talking about, this is a escape mechanism. So we actually did interview an adult child parental alienation who became a drug addict. He didn't want his face or his name shown, so we actually have an audio recording of him answering our questions, and it is actually really tragic because he felt really helpless in his life as an adult child parental alienation. And he actually, I remember something that really I remember it just really shook me, where he said something about, please, if you could just let other children out there in the world know that don't end up to be like me. Don't end up to be like me. Get help if you can, but really that experience of growing up in that environment caused him to being where he now felt like his life is dead end. And I remember talking to his sister, and she essentially said, we know it's just a matter of time. We just don't know how, but it's just a matter of time. We're going to get that phone call and we're going to be told that he's gone. And it's really, really tragic. It's really sad. And then the next item here is talking about sex and pornography. So addiction and dependency on sex and pornography. So 10% of the participants spoke about leading a promiscuous and impulsive lifestyle to find connections with others, right? So because when you suffer so much emotionally, and especially when there's all the other issues that we're talking about in terms of lack of self-identity and seeking approval and wanting to please others, right? It's understandable when you create that kind of dependency or tendency to dependency. Okay, so the next item is about emotional pain. So I just saw in the chat room, John said, I'm waiting for that same phone call, and that's just horrible. That's horrible, because you're mourning in so many levels. You're mourning for your child that is still alive now, and then you're also mourning to to anticipate losing them forever, and just it's just horrible. Like I'm so sorry. And then I see Jay said teachers are only one aspect. They have their bosses that give school direction and maybe conduct a poll and ask police department question about how common it is in the lines. Jay, actually, we are working on that, and actually, if you have time, if you wanted to help, we're actually doing a lot of that work in terms of doing public information requests for the number of calls that involving, parental alienation, interference, like custody interference and things like that. So that there are public information that we can actually get. We don't actually have to do a poll. We actually get the actual data. So we are working on that project. We do have a lot of data already, and I wanted to say really Claudia is the one that lead in this project, and I'm grateful for her. So if you wanted to help with that, Jay, I know that we can definitely do with your help. We're working on some specific locality right now because we don't have enough resources to cover everywhere, but we thought if we can start at one particular county in one particular state in the US, and look at that data, and the data so far has already been very depressing, but we're trying to complete all level of the data to understand how this going down the funnel, as in how many parents call in, and then how many of them the police actually don't turn up, and how many of them they turn up and then they didn't do anything about it, and how many of them they actually write a report and said that is a problem, and how many of them eventually where the DA office, the district attorney office actually look at and said, okay, this is a criminal matter, we need to do something about it, and how many of them actually go into prosecution, and how many of them actually get prosecuted. So we are looking at, we are collecting data at all levels, and there's a Freedom of Public Information Act that allow us to access those data, but it does require a lot of work for us to go through all those processes at all level. So we have collected a lot of data, we just haven't finished, and we do wanted to collect that for many places, as many places as possible. So really, if you wanted to help with any of that, we definitely would appreciate your help. Okay, so let's continue. The next section is about emotional pain. And so participant described how their exposures associated with emotional pain in adulthood. There was a total of 83 references to emotional pain across 95% of the data set. And so here are the 8 sub-themes. So one of them is shame and guilt. Okay, 45% of the participants recall feeling guilt or shame about their experience. Some had come to understand that although they knew their experience was not their fault, they could not avoid feeling guilty or avoid feelings of guilt that lasted into adulthood. Some participants were confused by their guilt and were unable to explain why they feel guilty. So this is definitely something that I experienced, because to be a grown adult, to realize that I had rejected one of my parents unjustifiably, it's the amount of shame and guilt is just you can't even describe it, and you almost couldn't live with yourself, because you did everything to reject that parent that was loving and fit parent and available and wanting to be there for you, and you rejected that parent because you were under the influence of parental alienation. So definitely this is something that your children, if they don't feel it now, which likely they are feeling it, they should not showing it, but really for them to later that they have to deal with it, the impact is really really traumatic. Because the next thing is self-esteem. 40% of the participants reported how being exposed to parental alienating behaviors in childhood has impacted their self-esteem into adulthood, with some feeling of worthless and unequal to others. One participant reflected on how low confidence and self-esteem was linked back to not having a voice in childhood. And that's understandable, right? Because in parental alienation, the alienating parents don't care about the child truly need and the truly voice. So they will override the child by manipulating the child and sometimes even forcefully putting their voice, their opinion over the child's opinion and all that. So then the child grow up without that sense of confidence and self-esteem. So that's definitely understandable. And then loneliness and isolation. Okay, 30% of the participants reflect on the loneliness and isolation. Some choose to isolate themselves from the outside world. Others felt lonely and isolated, which they attributed to the exposure of parental alienating behaviors. Now, we are here in the world really to be a part of this human experience. The interaction with the world is so important. It's actually really, it's a part of that human experience. So when these adult children, because of their upbringing, because of parental alienation that cause them to want to isolate themselves from the outside world, the children are being deprived of this really important part of their life experience, and that's really unfortunate. And also, it's natural to understand why they feel lonely and isolated, because it's very hard for other people to understand what they go through, right? So it's very hard to express that. It's very hard to share your story and hope that other people understand. So that's why it's very difficult, and it's understandable why they feel lonely and isolated. Okay, the next thing is about helplessness. 20% of the participants reflected on feeling of helplessness in terms of their exposure to parental alienating behaviors in their childhood and their current experience of being a target parent. I don't think I need to explain to you the feeling of helplessness. I think many of you felt that way, and that's really unfortunate. Grief and loss. Definitely, 60% of participants feeling their feelings of grief and loss, with the most predominant responses involving a sense of loss around childhood, family, and denial of access to the target parent. Yeah, because as an adult that recognized that they were alienated during their childhood, you really realize that your childhood was stolen, and you was deprived of opportunities to have a relationship with the target parent. So much would taken away from you. So definitely you can understand the sense of grief and loss. Anger, okay, is the next one. 45% of the participants reported feeling varying degree of anger, mainly aimed at the alienating parent. Because once you recognize that you were alienated, then it's very hard to not feeling resentment and anger toward that parent, because why did you stole that parent from me? Why did you destroy my childhood, right? So definitely we understand that. Abandonment, of course, because why? The whole childhood they were told by the alienators that the target parents didn't love them, abandoned them. So you're already growing up with this sense of abandonment, and then when you as an adult, now you realize that you were manipulated and you were programmed and brainwashed. Then you realize that actually the alienating parents, the alienators, also don't care about you. So now it's actually double that abandonment. It's really confirmed that like there's nobody there that truly care about you, nobody that's there for you. So you that's why this feeling here. And then trust issues, of course, I'm sure you understand this. Other participants describe how it was difficult for them to trust other people and themselves because they feel vulnerable, right? So these are the 8 categories in the emotional pain. So you see, these are the pains that your children, the adult children, experience. And then the paper going into coping and resilience, they're talking about the children. So they said 95% of participants, and we need to keep that in mind. This coping and resilience is only applying to these children that are being interviewed, and these children are the children that woke up and recognize that they were alienated, right? So there's a lot to say about that, because these people there are children that never wake up, that they will just continue with their life and wondering why they suffer all these emotional problems and they never wake up. And so their coping and their resilience could be quite different from what we find here. Okay, so the three sub-theme here. We got maladaptive coping. So 50% of the participants reported using coping styles that were maladaptive, so including stoicism, avoidance, interference, indifference, mistrust, creating barriers, vengeful thinking against the alienating parents, and withdrawal, with 59 references made across the data set. So, you know, they trying to sort of not deal with it, right? They create barrier, they're trying to kind of protect themselves, they vengeful thinking, you know, they wanted to revenge, they angry, they resentful, they withdraw, right? So these are not really healthy coping mechanism, right? And then adaptive coping. So participants describe using adaptive coping strategy with total of 56 references made by 80% of the group. So things like cognitive reframing, acceptance, forgiveness, healing, self-education about parental alienation, self-care, and engaging in therapy and support groups. Okay, so this is actually not too different to the coping mechanisms that targeted parents experience. I don't know if my live stream is still working. It seemed to me that it's paused or something. Is it still working? I could someone let me know, because it seemed like it's frozen. So I hope that it's still working. But and I know I saw a message earlier from Kenneth said, how can I download this? Kenneth, you can just message us and we will send you a copy of this paper. Yeah, just message us on VictimToHero Facebook page and we will send you a copy of this. Okay, so this let's get back to this. Okay, John said it's working. Thank you so much. So it's not that different from you dealing with the trauma and the situation of parental alienation. I hope that you look at this and you can see that you can avoid the maladaptive coping and trying to get on to adaptive coping mechanism, which are more healthy, right? So they talk about cognitive reframing. So, you know, like you look at something and reframing it so that you can look at things a little bit differently in a more positive and empowering way. And then, you know, acceptance, forgiveness, healing, self-education about parental alienation. Actually, I want to really give a kudos to you guys, because you guys are here. You care enough. You don't want to give up. You really, we have to say a lot about your resiliency and your adaptive coping, because you are here, you wanted to learn about it. And yeah, definitely self-care. Sometimes, you know, you forget you're in so much pain. So really put an effort in for self-care. It's really important. Engaging in therapy and support groups. We do have a number of support groups. So, you know, feel free to join us. Candace said, love you guys. Thank you so much. Really, your support means a lot to us. Okay, so the next sub-theme is that meaning making. So all participants spoke about trying to make a meaning, to make meaning of their experience in their adulthood, with 154 references to topics such as using self-reflection, gaining perspective, confusion about their experience of being exposed to parental alienating behaviors in childhood, and coming to realization of alienating a parent was lying, you know, using memories, have life lessons, conflicting thoughts about their experience, and contributing to research into parental alienation. So another coping mechanism or way to cope is they trying to understand, right? So try to make meaning out of it, try to self-reflect, try to understand, things like that. Okay, so those was the raw data, sort of the finding, and then they go in and they discuss more, you know, what each of these mean. You know, they're talking about what does it mean, what the environment and things like that. So I'm going to leave you guys to read this. They go into the emotional pain and coping and all that. So I do want to go through this one. It said key finding. So these are some of the items that they think is important to highlight. So they talk about drug use. You know, over half of the sample reported past or current substance use, and some describe depending on the daily cannabis use to get through the day, and needing to use recreational drugs when engaging in social occasions to have a good time. And this is similar to a previous study by Dr. Amy Baker, also found that 1/3 of the participants use alcohol or drugs as a coping mechanism. Now, this is important because if people have to depend on drugs and alcohol to cope, then you lose that freedom of choice to be able to just live your life, right? So definitely that is something that's important to note. And then confusion about their experience. Many participants describe feeling confused about their experience being exposed to parental alienation, especially when trying to make meaning of the past. And that's the thing, is because there's so much going on. There's so much manipulation, lying, hiding of information. And as a child, it's already difficult trying to grow up and understand what's going on around you. You throw on top of that parental alienation. So it's definitely difficult. And that's why we can understand why they have this confusion. So they said participants describe feeling confused about their identity, their perception of reality, and failure to trust their judgment. See, perception of reality, this is a problem because it's really hard to figure out, well, what's true and what's not, and what's really happening and what's not happening, and what happened in the past and what did not happen, because there's so much, like I said, so much stuff going on with so much lies and deception. So these findings align with previous research showing the adult exposed to parental alienating behaviors can experience a confused sense of self. And then is associated with difficulties in identity development and mental health concern in adulthood. The confusion encountered by adults exposed to parental alienating behaviors in childhood can be related to ambitious losses they experience. And then they also, participants had sought help with therapists unfamiliar with, this is a big problem here. When people look for help from therapists that are not familiar with parental alienation, we talk about this, how it's counterintuitive. So when you go to a therapy session where they don't understand what you are going through, you will feel invalidated and even more confused. So it's actually make things a lot worse. So we understand this. Okay, the next thing about education. Education about parental alienation will increase coping. So what it's saying here is that the more you understand, the more you learn about parental alienation, the better it is for you to cope. And so this finding may be explained by the Foucauldian discourse analysis, which say that knowledge is the power. Knowledge is hypothesized to increase power. And this is certainly appear true for participants who were actively engaging in raising parental alienation awareness, advocacy, self-education, and therapy. I can tell you this is entirely true for me, right? So I'm actively engaged in raising awareness, advocacy, self-education, therapy, things like that, right? So because of that, I definitely feel more power in coping as an adult child parental alienation. Okay, these participants seem better able to describe and reflect on their experiences, more so than participants who were not engaged in activities increasing knowledge of parental alienation. So this, I would say, would be very similar to you as an adult, as a alienated parent. The more active you are in engaging in advocacy and raising awareness and self-education, things like that, I think, from my personal opinion, is that it's going to help you cope better as well. Okay, and then the next thing is intergenerational transmission of parental alienation. We talked about this before, how this is a multi-generation thing. So the current study gave further weight to finding the previous research showing. So this is not the first study that showed that this is an intergenerational thing. So of the participant interview, 50% were parents who described being alienated from their children because of parental alienating behaviors. So if you were a child that was alienated from one of your parents, chances are you're going to grow up and become an alienated parent, unfortunately. Participants who were now targeted parents disclosed profound difficulties in coping with the fight to maintain relationship with their children. So this is true for whether you were an adult child of parental alienation or not, because I can see, we see that among you guys, you even when you would experience parental alienation as a child, trying to cope with the fight to maintain a relationship with your children is profoundly difficult. And Kenneth said cross-generational coalition. Yeah, definitely, right? So it's really difficult, and it's difficult to communicate with the alienating parents. Yeah, because why? They are not very cooperating party, right? And then difficult to attending and financing the ongoing legal battle. And that's a problem because, legal, like you end up having to go in and out court, fighting, and it just seems like it's never end. And so, yeah, it is difficult. And then Kenneth said, not necessarily if they are an alienated child may grow up to be an alienated parent. I'm not saying that it's always the case. I'm saying there is a correlation. There have been many research that show that when you have been alienated as a child, there's a high likelihood that you're going to grow up and become an alienated parent. It's not 100%, but there is a clear correlation there. And then trying to find a way to cope with your losses. Yeah, while prioritizing their mental health. So definitely difficult. Okay, and then concerning suicidal ideation rate, almost 1/3 of the participants describing having past or current suicidal ideation. Many of these participants had attempted suicide. Most were targeted parents who appear particularly distressed about continuing cycle of past exposure to parental alienating behaviors and current exposure as an adult. And really, everyone said, I didn't kill myself because of my children. So I don't want to, so that's what it says here. And yeah, so these are really important factors to be aware and understand. So Alice said, I downloaded the paper from the link listed in the overview session of this chat. Okay, good. Thank you, Alicia. And then Jay said, it happened to me. Mom kidnapped my sister. Oh, wow. So have you reunited with your sister, Jay? And then, so that's the key finding. And then they go on and talk about what this means, like how we need to have clinician must reflect on their competency, when they're working with people exposing to parental alienation, because lack of knowledge can result in further damage and invalidation and different things. There's a lot of different things here. And then it talk about limitation and the future direction. So because obviously this is one of the study, and more work is definitely needed. So that essentially was the paper. I wanted to highlight that for you guys. Like I said, if you wanted to get a copy of it, just message us and we'll do our best to get you a copy. It's a very insightful study and definitely highly recommended. Jay said it was for a year. Okay. I hope that your sister is okay and was able to recover well. Benji said, is there a professionally recommended grade or age to give teachers this document? And would it be grounds for the alienating parent to take the target parent back to court over it? I can't say anything about the court aspect of it because I'm not a lawyer and I don't really understand. And also every case different, right? So some case you even have a sanction against you from being able to communicate certain things with your teacher. So I don't know, but like I said, we do have a general educational spreadsheet, flyer, because this paper is pretty big, right? So it's hard to expect somebody to just kind of read it. But we do have a flyer that is sort of like visually more appealing with color and images and just bullet points, easy to scan through. They can look at it in a few minutes. So if you wanted to use that, I would kind of recommend that over anything else. But like I said, really it's specific to your case in terms of what you can or cannot do. What that flyer was designed for is for you to print out and really hand it as a general thing, not just to your child teacher, but just a general thing to pass out at your child's school or any other school, just a general public information kind of thing. Jay said, when I was 12 and 13 years old, my sister was 6 or 7. How did that impact you and your sister, Jay. I wonder. Um, so yeah, so thank you so much, you guys, for being here, for your support, not just today but all along. We do have a number of private events coming up that 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 are in person. That there's an opportunity for you to participate in person. I think we listed a few locations, but there could be more locations coming up. So just let us know. You can message us and let us know where you are. I think we have event coming up in New York and some other places. I think there's one coming up in Colombia, the country Colombia. So things like that. So yeah, definitely let us know where you are if you're interested in joining us in person. Those are usually going to be really small private events that we're not going to open to the public, and we may not announce it to the public. So really, if you wanted to be a part of that, then definitely just let us know by through to messaging us on Facebook. I saw Selma said, "Where's the link for the political action pack?" So the political action pack, the political action committee, which is the short word is PAC, is called Respectfully. So Respectfully PAC, so PAC. So if you go to Respectfully PAC, either on Facebook or on just .com or whatever, you'll find our website, you'll find the Facebook page, things like that. You can find those. I shouldn't say we, because I helped created that, but I actually intentionally leave myself out of that community. I'm helping with everything that's going on, but I wanted to focus more on the programs here, like education and resources, and I definitely help with the activities in the political committee, but I'm not officially a part of that committee. But yeah, Selma, if you check Claudia's message, or maybe Claudia can respond to you and give you the direct link if you have any trouble finding it. So thank you so much, you guys. On Friday, this Friday, we have an interview with Dr. William Burnett about the efforts that we are working on to put parental alienation into the DSM. So the DSM is a manual, the manual diagnostic manual for the mental health professionals. So it's very important for us to literally have parental alienation as a wording in the DSM. Right now, parental alienation is described in the DSM. You can diagnose it using other things in the DSM, but it doesn't go in there as the word parental alienation. So there's an effort now among a particular advocacy group, and so we are working to put this into the DSM. So on Friday, we're going to have that interview. I hope that you can join us. We're really looking forward to share with you the important information and how you can help making the history. You can participate and help making the history, because the more support we have, the more likely it's going to be accepted. So anyway, I hope to see you guys soon. If you could help by please like this video, please share, join our mailing list on our website, VictimToHero.com. And if you have any more questions, feel free to post it, because especially if there's any particular question that's suitable for other events or other interviews, I'm happy we're happy to work on those. So let us know your questions and we'll hope to find solutions for you. So thank you so much and stay wonderful.